Hey guys, I want to make sure that you are fully understanding APIs, and I want to do a little bit more of a deep dive breaking down data parameters and understanding how to explain the different types of parameters that are being sent and the payload that's coming back. So let's go ahead and do a quick deep dive and use an example. All right. So in the example that I'm going through right now, um, imagine you're at a telecom company like AT&T or T-Mobile or Verizon or whatever, and imagine you have a MySQL database. And let's say with the MySQL database, that's where you have things like customer profile that's being stored, account information, order history, and a few others, right? These are the tables that are being stored in the database. Let's look at an example of one table, like the customer profile table. So imagine in the customer profile table, you have it's a table, so there's rows and columns, right? Imagine you have customer type, right? Because this we're talking about customers here, right? Imagine a Verizon customer, right? Customer type, which is going to be a string. A string is anything that is in quotes, right? You could have any type of numeric character in there. And you typically, when you're defining, examples of when you're creating the table, the people that create the table or define the requirements for the table, they basically want to have examples of what could possibly go into that variable, into that data type, right? So into customer type, the examples I'm putting are consumer, SMB, corporate, right? These are the acceptable possible possibilities of what should be able to go into customer type, right? Account type is it an owner, manager, member, child? We could also say, customer first name, string. That's just going to be like the first name, customer last name, string. Notice I'm putting underscores because when you have variables in code and whatnot, there's no spaces. Last name. You might have a customer ID. That could be an integer, right? It could be an integer. Um, right? Like example 786, I don't know, 654. And I could come up with other variables, right? But let's just for now, let's just pretend that this is the customer profile table. So this is what is in the data table. Okay. And that's customer profile. So what are the types of things can you get in a customer profile table? You got the customer type, you have account type, you have customer first name, customer, I kind of messed up there. First name, customer last name, customer ID, right? Account information. So this might be a similar type of a table. Let's just go down here and but it's for account, right? The account info table. And what kinds of things might be in an account information? Um, right, this is the customer account. So customer, it might be a customer account number or ID. That could be an integer, right? It could be account type. Now notice in the customer profile table, there could be an account type and there could be also an account type. Do you know why? You know what we call this? This is kind of like a key because if you want to access the account info table and look up a particular account, you could use if you know the account type, you could pull it up, right? So even if you don't know the customer type or the customer first name, you don't know the last name, you don't know anything, but if you know the account type or the account, I'm sorry, account type, account ID would probably be better. Uh, okay, I'm sorry. I just realized there's no account ID. You know what? You know what? You have a customer ID, and customer ID. So those could be the keys, right? These could be keys because you could then use this to access the account info table and look something up. Um, okay, so what else? Account information. You might have account owner. Um, this might be like the first name um, and the last name, like the full name, basically. Um, yeah. And you might have maybe you have payment type string, you know, Visa, MasterCard, maybe it's PayPal, as an example. Um, and there could be other things we could come up with, but let's just keep it simple right now. All right. And lastly, order history. Order history table. And you can imagine for the order history table, you probably need to know the customer account ID, account owner, um, actually owner name. We probably don't care for that or any of this. We probably want to know the order history table with the account ID. We probably get the um, order order list, and the order list. Um, Yeah, the order list. The order list could be a string. It could be like a list of order numbers. And then you could have perhaps it's like order, this could actually be an array. An array is like basically a it's like a list essentially. So it could be a list of strings. So it could be for each item in the list. You can imagine it's probably going to be order number, which is a string, and what else? Probably the order SKU, which could be an integer, and you might have the device name, which is a string, device color, which is a string, device memory, which could be string, device color, memory, device family, maybe device operating system, Android or Apple. There's so many other things, right? I could go on and on and on, but I'll stop here, right? And imagine that's like that would be like one order and then comma and then like another order, another order. So that's how it shows up. Okay. So now that we have an idea of these tables, right? Once you have this idea of the tables, now you could consider thinking of, okay, this is the data, this is how it's organized in these tables. Now, how can we start thinking about creating APIs, right? Um, well, to be honest, when you think about APIs, you're trying to solve a problem. So I'm going to create another little tab here, and I'm going to we could call it APIs. let's say, for example, you um, let's just put use case. Um, there's a few different use cases. Let's say one use case is you want the customer to look up an order, right? Order lookup, right? Um, you want the customer, let's say there's other use. Let's start off with this one, this use case, order lookup. Well, if you're going to look up an order, you can imagine there's like on the UI, there's going to be some type of search functionality where they could look it up by, search by date, um, order number, um, device name, right? There's lots of possibilities here, but let's just say, there's different things you could search for. So the idea is that you could look it up and then you'll get as a result, you'll get like the order information, right? It's an order lookup. So let's say that let's just imagine, right? Let's just imagine, for example, there's a page, and in that page it says order lookup, and there's like a little button here or whatever, or an area to search. There's like a search CTA, right? And you could enter in, you could enter in a date, order number, or device name, right? So they enter it in and they hit the search CTA. Well, what happens? What type of API call are we going to have? Well, in order to get an order, right, what we want to look up the order history table, right? The order history table has all of the list of the orders. Well, guess what? The first thing that we would need, right, is the account ID, and that would be able to pull up and search for different orders and whatnot. So we would definitely need to know the customer account ID. Um, and the customer account ID is located in the account information table. And yeah, but um, that's here. And in order for us to get the customer account, uh, get the right customer account ID from this table, we need to access this table and with the customer ID. Okay. So step one in the back end steps, right? Step one would be we need an API get request to the um, profile table, right? So imagine so we need to make sure there's an API that's built that basically interacts with this profile table, so it could get us what we need, right? So imagine they're signed in, and if they're signed in, let's say we already know their name and we have their account type and customer ID. So as soon as they hit enter here, the search CTA, there should be it's a get request, and the parameters that you're sending in the request are going to be what? Well, we're going to send the account, the customer ID, customer ID, right? We're going to send the customer ID. It's going to be some kind of string, or I guess it was an integer, right? And that's what we're going to send, right? And and we want to design this API such that when someone sends a customer ID, and they also perhaps send a request, um, customer ID, or we could just say customer ID. When they send a customer ID, um, and they also uh, send a request for the account, the customer account ID. Customer account ID, right? So what is the request? What are we asking for? A customer account ID. Then in the response, we can get basically the customer ID, and we can get the customer account ID with it. And then another API. So now we got the customer account ID, which is awesome. So then step two, we would do a API GET request to the order history table. Order history table. And the params in the request would be we would be sending the customer account ID. And the idea is that, if we send the customer account ID, and we could also send a query, uh, and that would be a string. And the query could be either the date, the order number, the device name, right? And then in the response, because it'll query, and in the response, if we'll get the order, like the matching order, right? So if there was a matching order with that device name, or it could be an order, we could say an order list, which is going to be the list. It's going to be an array. It's going to be a list of matching orders. So maybe you put iPhone, and it's going to come back with all of the matching orders that match iPhone, and it's going to be a response like that. And that happens in the back end. So now on the front end, you're going to have that list, right? You're going to have a list of orders, and you're going to have quite a lot of information to play with, right? You're going to have all of this in the response. So let's just say you had sent, you got this now. So as an example, in the response, let's say there was like, I don't know, let's say there were two matching, there were two, there were two iPhones that matched. The order number, da, 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 SKU number, I'm just gonna make this up. Device name, iPhone 12, color black, space memory 256 gigabytes, family, Apple, device, iOS, um, maybe it was iPhone mini or something, I don't know. Okay, so that would be like one order, right? Order number, and then this is like order SKU and stuff. And then let's say there was another one, right? There was actually two phones that were ordered that were iPhones. There was another iPhone 12, and this one was red. Maybe it was 32 gigs or something, right? So in the response now, you have this is the data that you have, right? This right here is the data that you have to play with. Um, so when you as a product manager needs to understand the data that you have to play with. So this is what you have. This is the data that comes back. Now, what do you want to do with the data? Right? So coming back to like the idea here, the main idea, okay, they did an order lookup, they put in iPhone, they hit search, and then in the search results, what do you want to display? Right? So in the search results on the UI in the front end, right, for order lookup, how do you want to show it? So you might want to have like um, maybe there's going to be um, a list of orders, right? Maybe it's like maybe the title would be purchase history, and you might have do you really want to show everything? Like, do you want to show up? No, of course not, right? Just because you have all the data doesn't mean you show everything, right? That's why you have to be a smart product manager. What do you want to show? you have this data, but you don't have to show everything. So perhaps you just want to show, maybe you want to show the order number, order number, um, the device name, and the um, and perhaps the order number, device name, maybe the date it was ordered, and the um, purchase price or something, right? Maybe that's all. And I'm sorry I didn't put that there. Maybe we could add that. Let's just pretend that was there. Purchase price or date ordered and price. Okay. Okay. So it was August or something. I don't know. Cool. So the order number would be, as you can see, would be this guy, right? And the device name was iPhone mini, and date ordered was whatever I put there, 7/7/2021. So and just because it says 7/7/21, does that mean you have to display it? You could make it more user friendly, right? It's a UI. It's, there's code that could convert this. So it could be July 7/7/2021. Purchase price was it says 423.23, 423.23, right? So maybe that's how it shows, right? I mean, you could even have it, you could even look up the image for it based on the device ID. It could be another API call to pull the image. So you could show the image as well. There's lots of stuff you could do, right? Um, order number, you could make this order number clickable where when you click on that, you get more of the price information. And then you could do another API call to get like more of the details of the price, the receipt or something. There's lots of possibilities. Maybe you click on iPhone mini to get the details, and then the details you display the details 256 mini, like you have like a little CTA saying details or something, right? And then you click on the details and suddenly there's a little pop-up, and in the pop-up it shows the details, because we have the details, right? It says iPhone 12 black 256. So then it shows up and it says name iPhone 12, color black, memory 256, right? So what I'm trying to get at here is that when you're thinking about APIs, right, you need to really think it's really about understanding the data that you have in the tables and what tables, because perhaps there's multiple calls. Because as you could see, I can't just make an API call that goes to the order history table. Now, it could be that there's one API call that's made, and in the back end, there's going to be multiple hops jumping from table to table as it searches, and it we'll figure it out. That's perfectly acceptable, by the way. That's like, I'm kind of oversimplifying this idea or complicating this idea, but I just wanted to do that for the example. But in reality, you might just have one API call where you're sending the customer ID, and in the back end, it's going to take that ID, query the info table, and it'll get the account customer ID, and then it's code, so it doesn't have to like wait for another API call. You could have it as soon as it gets that, it'll query another table, the order history table, using the customer ID, and do the search, right, and come back with the order list. But this conversation really, the gist of what I'm trying to get at is that, you know, you as a product manager, when you want to, if your end goal is to have an order lookup, as an example, you want to be able to think of like, well, what is it that I want to show, right? And also, if I want them to look up orders, where do we have this data? Where is this data? Um, you know, and most likely, if there's an API that exists, perhaps there is an API that exists, um, and we can make changes to it. For example, perhaps there's an API that currently exists that goes to the order history table. And the way that API works is that you send a customer account ID and it comes back with the entire order list, all of it. What if you didn't want all of it? What if you only wanted, what if you only wanted one specific order? Like just you wanted to look something up by a particular order number or a SKU or a color. You want to look up all the phones that I have that are black, device color black. Well, you would change, you could use that API and you could change the requirements such that when the parameters are sent, right? When the when you're sending the parameters in the request, right? The request parameters, you could APIs could be used in many ways. So you could you could code it such that if you send only the customer account ID, if that's the only thing that you send, then the response will be the entire order list, like all the orders, right? But if you send the account customer account ID plus, sorry, my bad. If you send the customer account ID and you also send the something like device color, right? Then it's going to uh, only respond with the any orders that match device color, the device color, right? So maybe there's 10 orders and only two of them had device colors were black. There was an iPad that was black and there was a Samsung Galaxy that was black. So that's what comes back, right? Um, so when they make that change to the API in the user story, you would basically be adding this additional part of, hey, look, currently when you send this request parameter, we get the entire list, but now we're just going to edit it. So if we send in an additional parameter to the device colors, then we only want those orders that have that device color. And you could do multiple different variations. It's like hundreds of different variations of this, right? Hey, if I send the customer account ID and the SKU number or the operating system or whatever, right? Like there's so many different variations of this, and you could then you know change the response. You could even put like you could put something like maybe you put customer account ID and uh, you know, um, it could be last five, the last five, the last five orders, right? So if that comes in the request, then only the most recent five orders is comes back. You could think as you start building out your application, your website, there's sometimes you don't want, right? You don't want 10, 20, 30 because this is very heavy, right? Remember we talked about like data, like loading and stuff, load times and stuff. Like imagine you had like so much information coming back. Do you really need all that information to come back in the API response? No. So maybe you could send a certain uh, you know, you could kind of tailor it so it doesn't come back with so much. So APIs are really powerful like that, right? You don't have to create a brand new API call. No, you could use the same API and you could edit the logic and the code such that and the developers will do that. But you have to decide, hey, look, when we send last five orders in addition to that in the request, then this is what we want to come back. Now the developers, when they code, they could it's just an if else statement, right? If there's customer account ID, now if there's a customer account ID plus last five orders, then they could code that. That's not difficult for them. So this is really important, right, to wrap your head around because in interviews they might ask you, right, like, okay, imagine you're at imagine you're at Costco and on Costco.com, right? And we have and Verizon has a relationship with Costco.com, and we want to allow Costco customers to get purchase Verizon phones. And if they're Costco members, right, if they're Costco members, they can get 50% off upgrade, an upgrade at Verizon. So, you could be asked that question in an interview, so walk me through like the steps. What would you build? And, I was asked this question, right, in an interview. So you just want to think it through, right? Like start off by saying, well, okay, and always talk it through. Let's walk this through. So on Costco.com, you probably want to advertise, hey, 50% off for Verizon customers, you know, um, uh, and then it could be like something like, sign in to see if you're eligible, right? Um, and then there's like a Verizon, CTA on Costco.com. As soon as they click it, there's a handshake between, right? There's going to be a handshake between Costco and Verizon. So there's going to be an API call that goes from Costco to Verizon. It's going to be a get request, and the parameters that we're sending would be what we would be sending, probably um, the login username, uh, and the password, right? That's what you're sending, and the response would be, authenticated, like yes, no, and let's say it is authenticated, then also, are they upgrade eligible? Yes, no. And if they are upgrade eligible, device list, upgrade device list. You know, that could be like a device list of what devices are eligible. Um, this is just an example. I'm just kind of again oversimplifying it, but there could be other things if you really took some time to think about it. But you get the idea, right? So there's going to be an API call because Costco they don't have access to Verizon customers. They don't even know if you're a Verizon customer. So they're going to need a little CTA there and a little pop-up that asks you to enter in your login and password, and then it sends it over Verizon. They authenticate to Verizon. If it gets authenticated, Verizon could then see if you're eligible or not based on your login and password. Based on your login, they'll know, are you a kid? Are you the account owner, the member? Are you the mom and dad? You own the account? Or are you some like, teenager that's trying to upgrade, but you don't have the ability to do it without the account owner's permission, right? All of that stuff. So you want to think through that. So long story short, you could be asked this type of question in an interview, and you want to be able to walk them through very confidently. Um, Even if you don't understand all the variables, you could ask questions, but you could also make assumptions, right? There's no problem. You don't understand everything at Costco or Verizon, but just think through things. Hey, if I sign in um, as a Verizon customer, how can I sign in? Well, probably I could sign in with my username or an email or a pass or a phone number and obviously a password, right? And um, and then once I'm authenticated, right, what is it that I'm trying to find out? Well, Costco wants to know, they can't give you 50% off unless you're not just a Verizon customer, but also Verizon's going to acknowledge because they're probably going to pay Costco back or there's some type of, payment relationship there, right? So they want to make sure Verizon has confirmed you are upgrade eligible. What if you're not? What if this is only for people that are going to do an upgrade? Right? So they have to check. And Verizon can do that check, and then respond back saying, hey, you are upgrade eligible. And then boom, you're able to get that 50% off. All right. So I know that might have been a mouthful, but it's really good review and very important for you to start thinking through, data types, data tables. These are very simple things, but you want to be able to think about how is data stored and what data do I want to send and what data do I want to get back, right? These are things that you want to think on your feet. And perhaps one of the best ways to practice is to take some examples, right? Hey, what if they asked you in the interview, hey, at Netflix, if you're on Netflix and let's say you want to um, add your uncle who and give him Netflix access, and he'll get 50% off, but only if he's a T-Mobile member. Well, how would that work? How would you authenticate? There'd be an API call going out externally going out to T-Mobile, right? And they'll authenticate. But what information do we have to send to T-Mobile to confirm that, your uncle is who he says he is and he has a T-Mobile account, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not rocket science. It's really not rocket science. It's actually not really technical. You know what it is? It's when you have a cabinet and you have your files and you're organizing all your files into folders, into different cabinets and stuff. That's what it is. It's like the socks go in the sock drawer, right? And your clothes goes and that's kind of like how you could kind of think about it. It's not rocket science. Anyways, hopefully this helped, and it's definitely something that you need to be prepared for, especially for the technical rounds.